The cradle of civilization emerged in Mesopotamia, the fertile land nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This region, whose name literally means the land between rivers, provided the unique conditions necessary for humanity's first great civilization to take root. Mesopotamia presented a paradoxical environment. The surrounding desert created a harsh, unforgiving barrier, while the rivers offered life-sustaining waters. Summer temperatures soared mercilessly, yet the annual river floods deposited nutrient-rich silt across the floodplains. These natural contradictions shaped the character and ingenuity of the people who would call this land home. The earliest permanent settlements of the Ubaid culture appeared during the 7th millennium before Christ. At sites like Tel al-Ubaid, archaeological evidence reveals the first mud brick structures, the earliest foundations of what would evolve into the world's first urban centers. These settlers lived in a time before metal, before writing, before kings. Yet they laid the groundwork for all these innovations. The mastery of irrigation marked the critical turning point in this ancient land. By engineering canals, the early Mesopotamians redirected unpredictable river waters, transforming devastating floods into a managed resource. This control over water allowed cultivation of previously barren land, generating agricultural surpluses previously impossible in such an arid landscape. This convergence of geography and innovation birthed an unprecedented experiment in human organization. As the Neolithic era unfolded, a remarkable civilization rose from these humble beginnings, establishing the fundamental patterns of urban life, developing the world's first writing system, and creating technological innovations that continue to influence our world millennia later. The Ubaid period, named after the archaeological site of Tel al-Ubaid near Ur, represents humanity's first steps toward complex society in southern Mesopotamia. These pioneering settlers created distinctive pottery, with geometric designs painted in black on a greenish background, archaeological markers that allow researchers to trace their cultural spread. Simple at first, these ceramic vessels evolved into sophisticated forms with delicate patterns, evidence of specialized craftspeople dedicating entire lifetimes to perfecting their art. Village architecture during this formative period reveals increasing social complexity. The earliest settlements consisted of small, round huts made from bundled reeds, materials readily available in the marshy delta. By 6000 BC, rectangular buildings constructed of hand-molded mud bricks began to appear, arranged around central courtyards. This architectural evolution reflected changing social organization, from simple family groups to extended households with shared work areas. Analysis of plant remains from these early sites reveals sophisticated agricultural knowledge. Farmers cultivated 6-row barley, emmer wheat, and flax, rotating crops to maintain soil fertility. Date palms provided fruit, shade, and building materials. Vegetable gardens yielded onions, garlic, and beans to supplement the grain-based diet. Fishing, hunting waterfowl, and raising domesticated animals rounded out their subsistence strategy, creating a diverse food system resilient against any single crop failure. The foundations of social hierarchy emerged during this period. Archaeological evidence reveals variation in burial goods, some graves containing only simple pottery, others featuring exotic materials like obsidian and lapis lazuli obtained through long-distance trade. These distinctions suggest differences in status, wealth, or social role. The complexity of irrigation networks further indicates coordinated labor under centralized leadership, as such systems required planning and maintenance beyond the capabilities of individual households. Religious practice centered on communal shrines that grew increasingly elaborate over time. At Tel Abada, archaeologists uncovered a tripartite temple with a central hall flanked by smaller rooms, an architectural pattern that would characterize Mesopotamian sacred buildings for millennia. Ritual objects found in these early shrines include female figurines, suggesting concern with fertility and regeneration. The increasing size and complexity of these religious structures reflect growing investment of community resources in spiritual infrastructure. Eridu stands as the most significant settlement of this formative era. Situated near an ancient lake in what is now southern Iraq, this site contains the oldest known temple in Mesopotamia. Archaeological excavations revealed 17 successive shrine buildings constructed one atop another, spanning over 2,000 years of continuous religious activity. The earliest structure was a simple mud brick platform, but each rebuild enlarged and elaborated the design, culminating in a complex temple compound. Dedicated to Enki, god of the freshwater deep and divine patron of wisdom, this sacred precinct foreshadowed the grand religious complexes that would define later Mesopotamian cities. The transition from temporary camps to permanent villages fundamentally transformed human experience. Where nomadic hunter-gatherers had moved seasonally in small bands, these agricultural pioneers established fixed communities tied to specific locations. Property concepts emerged as families invested labor in houses and fields that remained in use across generations. The ritual calendar synchronized with agricultural cycles, creating shared temporal rhythms that bound community members together. Seeds carefully selected and preserved, each harvest represented not only next year's crop, but accumulated knowledge transmitted across generations. At the heart of Sumerian civilization lay a revolutionary concept: the controlled manipulation of water. Long before the first ziggurats cast their shadows across the floodplain, these early farmers created networks of irrigation canals. Digging with simple stone and wooden tools, they connected the meandering rivers to distant fields through artificial waterways. This innovation transformed an unpredictable blessing into a reliable resource, allowing settlements to expand beyond the immediate riverbanks. The engineering feats accomplished with primitive technology astonish modern observers. Using only human labor and rudimentary tools, these ancient engineers maintained the precise gradients necessary for water flow over kilometers of terrain. They developed levee systems to protect fields from destructive floods and sluice gates to control water distribution. Sediment traps prevented silt accumulation that would have otherwise clogged the irrigation network. This water management infrastructure required constant maintenance, dredging channels, repairing embankments, clearing debris, necessitating organized communal labor under coordinated leadership. The sacred city of Eridu stands as testament to this transformative period. Founded in the 6th millennium BC, it grew around a temple dedicated to Enki, the water god, an acknowledgement of the life-giving force that made their existence possible. Archaeological layers reveal this site's humble origins as a small shrine, which gradually expanded into a complex with multiple buildings and courtyards. Eridu wasn't merely a settlement, it represented the first true temple town, where religious devotion became intertwined with civic administration. Most profoundly, this era witnessed humanity's decisive shift from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled agricultural life. For countless generations, humans had followed seasonal game migrations and gathered wild plants. Now, they bound themselves to specific locations, cultivating domesticated grains through systematic labor. Barley and emmer wheat grew in irrigated fields, while flocks of domesticated sheep and goats provided meat, milk, and wool. This transition fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with the natural world. The archaeological record reveals how this new lifestyle transformed social arrangements. Excavated homes show specialized spaces for food storage, evidence of planning for future needs. Clay tokens of various shapes appear during this period, likely representing the earliest accounting system for tracking agricultural production. The appearance of communal burial grounds indicates stronger ties to place and community. People now lived and died within the same sacred geography. During this formative age, the foundations were laid for a social complexity unprecedented in human history. Villages grew larger with each passing century, as agricultural surpluses allowed population growth. Craft specialization emerged as individuals could now devote time to non-food producing activities. These developments set Mesopotamia on a trajectory toward urban life, the next great leap in the Sumerian story. As the 5th millennium before Christ drew to a close, the agricultural foundations laid in Eridu and other early settlements bore extraordinary fruit. The scattered villages of Sumer coalesced into something unprecedented in human history: true cities. At the forefront of this urban revolution stood a settlement destined to become the world's first metropolis. This great urban center expanded at an astonishing rate. By 3200 BC, massive walls enclosed nearly 6 kilometers of densely populated space, home to approximately 50,000 souls, a concentration of humanity previously unimaginable. This was no mere village grown large. It represented a fundamentally new form of human organization. The city walls, built of sun-dried mud brick, stood not only as defense against outside threats, but as symbolic boundaries between the ordered world within and the chaotic wilderness beyond. The urban landscape revealed sophisticated planning at every turn. At the city's heart rose the Iana precinct, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, with its complex of temples arranged around courtyards and connected by processional ways. The White Temple, perched atop an artificial platform, a prototype for later ziggurats, commanded views across the entire settlement. Residential quarters spread outward from these sacred centers, with narrow, winding streets creating neighborhoods that bustled with activity from dawn until dusk. Archaeological excavations in the Iana district have uncovered a sophisticated complex of religious buildings, unlike anything previously seen in human history. The Stone Cone Temple, named for the decorative stone cones embedded in its walls, featured a tripartite plan with a central hall flanked by smaller chambers. Nearby stood the Limestone Temple, constructed of imported stone blocks, a remarkable luxury in stone-poor Mesopotamia, demonstrating the tremendous resources devoted to sacred architecture. The pillar hall contained massive columns supporting a high ceiling, creating an imposing internal space designed to inspire religious awe. These structures incorporated decorative elements like clay cone mosaics and copper panels that would have gleamed impressively in the harsh Mesopotamian sunlight. Across the city, the Anu Ziggurat complex represented another pole of sacred power. Dedicated to the sky god Anu, this artificial mountain rose in stages, with the White Temple crowning its summit. The stark, white-plastered walls of this shrine contrasted dramatically with the blue sky, visible from throughout the surrounding plain. Inside, a single room contained an altar, an offering table, where priests performed rituals connecting the earthly and divine realms. The monumental staircase ascending the ziggurat's face served as physical and symbolic pathway between human and divine spheres, a literal stairway to heaven. City life transformed human relationships in profound ways. No longer could everyone know everyone else. Strangers now lived side by side, necessitating new social rules and hierarchies. The archaeological record reveals increasing variation in house sizes, evidence of growing social stratification. Some dwellings remained simple, single-room structures, while others expanded into multi-room compounds with private courtyards, reflecting the emergence of an elite class. Residential neighborhoods reflect this urban society's complexity. Archaeological excavations reveal densely packed houses along narrow, winding streets where refuse accumulated between infrequent cleanings. Extended families occupied multi-room dwellings built around central courtyards that provided light, air circulation, and workspace for domestic activities. Beneath the floors of many houses lay the burials of family members, maintaining connection between living and dead generations. Upper-story sleeping quarters offered escape from ground-level heat, while rooftop spaces served as additional living areas during cooler evening hours. The archaeological layers reveal centuries of rebuilding along the same street patterns, indicating established neighborhoods with long-lasting social connections. Most crucially, these urban centers could only function through interdependence and specialization, unimaginable in village society. Farmers brought produce to urban markets, craftspeople created specialized goods, priests mediated between humanity and the divine, workers built and maintained public infrastructure. This division of labor marked a fundamental break from the self-sufficient village model that had characterized human existence for millennia. The urban revolution catalyzed a cascade of innovations that would transform human capability forever. Most consequential among these was the invention of writing, humanity's first system for recording information outside human memory. This breakthrough emerged not from philosophical or literary ambitions, but from practical administrative needs. The earliest clay tablets, dating to approximately 3400 BC, contain simple pictographic symbols representing commodities like grain, sheep, or beer. Temple administrators created these proto-cuneiform records to track goods flowing into and out of their storehouses. Each pictograph originally resembled the object it represented, a star-like symbol for sheep, a vessel shape for beer. These early records allowed unprecedented accounting precision in managing the complex urban economy. The evolution of writing occurred with remarkable speed. Within a few centuries, the pictographic system developed into true writing, capable of representing abstract concepts. Scribes rotated the signs 90 degrees, using a reed stylus to impress wedge-shaped marks in clay, the characteristic appearance that would give cuneiform its name, from Latin cunus, meaning wedge. The number of distinct signs decreased from about 2,000 pictographs to roughly 600 cuneiform characters, making the system easier to learn while expanding its expressive capabilities. By 3000 BC, scribes had developed techniques for representing the sounds of spoken language, allowing them to record names, verbs, and grammatical elements, the final step toward a complete writing system. Over generations, these practical symbols evolved into a sophisticated writing system capable of expressing abstract concepts and recording spoken language. The very act of writing transformed human thought, enabling complex administrative systems, precise mathematical calculations, and eventually literature itself. With writing, knowledge could accumulate across generations, no longer limited by the frailties of human memory. Equally transformative was the invention of the wheel. Sometime during the late 4th millennium BC, Mesopotamian potters adapted their turning platforms into true potter's wheels, allowing them to create vessels with unprecedented speed and symmetry. Shortly thereafter, wheeled vehicles revolutionized transportation. Clay models from this period depict four-wheeled carts pulled by oxen or onagers, dramatically increasing the volume of goods that could be moved across the landscape. The earliest wheels consisted of solid wooden discs cut from tree trunks, secured to axles with leather bindings and wooden pegs. These primitive designs soon gave way to lighter, more sophisticated constructions, with separate wooden segments joined together, an innovation that reduced weight while maintaining structural integrity. The invention of spoked wheels around 2000 BC would further revolutionize transportation technology, enabling the development of light, fast chariots that transformed warfare and communication. This period also witnessed remarkable advances in metallurgy. While earlier societies had occasionally worked with native copper, Sumerian metalworkers discovered smelting, the extraction of metal from ore through controlled heating. This innovation greatly expanded copper availability, leading to proliferation of metal tools, weapons, and ornaments. Archaeological evidence from graves of this era reveals increasing sophistication in metal production, with artisans creating complex alloys like arsenical copper that improved hardness and durability. The metallurgical revolution began with simple heating of copper-bearing rocks in campfires, yielding small nodules of workable metal. Sumerian craftspeople gradually developed specialized furnaces capable of reaching higher temperatures, using clay tubes called tuyères to direct airflow and intensify heat. By the late Uruk period, they had mastered techniques for casting molten metal in ceramic molds, allowing mass production of identical objects. Archaeological excavations have uncovered workshops with crucibles, molds, and slag deposits, evidence of industrial-scale metal production that helped fuel urban expansion. These technological breakthroughs both required and reinforced the emergence of specialized craftspeople. The archaeological record reveals dedicated workshops for potters, metalworkers, stone carvers, and other skilled artisans. Unlike their village ancestors who divided time between multiple tasks, these urban specialists devoted their lives to mastering specific crafts, achieving levels of skill and innovation impossible in earlier societies. Supporting this unprecedented urban system required equally revolutionary administrative structures. At the heart of Mesopotamian society stood the temple complex, not merely a religious institution, but the central organizing force of economic life. The impressive Iana precinct housed not only shrines, but extensive storehouses, workshops, and administrative spaces where the city's resources were managed. Temple economies operated on a redistributive principle. Agricultural surpluses flowed into temple storehouses as offerings to the gods, then were reallocated to support priests, craftspeople, and laborers who maintained the urban infrastructure. Early clay tablets reveal meticulous accounting of these resources. Records of grain distributions, ration allocations, and labor assignments that kept the complex urban machine functioning. The administrative challenges of managing urban resources drove innovations in accounting practice. Temple officials developed standardized ration systems, with specific allotments based on age, gender, and occupation. The archaeological record includes thousands of clay tokens in various shapes, cones, spheres, discs, that were used to track quantities of different commodities before being sealed in clay envelopes as permanent records. These counting devices eventually evolved into numerical notation on clay tablets, allowing more sophisticated bookkeeping. Administrators created complex systems for recording debits and credits, calculating interest on loans, and projecting agricultural yields. Mathematical innovations that formed the foundation for later economic development. The creation and maintenance of these records gave rise to a new and powerful social class, the scribes. Young men, and occasionally women, underwent years of rigorous training to master the complex writing system, memorizing hundreds of signs and learning to manipulate clay tablets with precision. Their education set them apart from the general population, granting them privileged positions in temple and palace administrations. The scribal class would remain a cornerstone of Mesopotamian civilization for 3,000 years. This period witnessed the emergence of clearly defined social stratification. Archaeological evidence reveals growing distinctions in housing, burial practices, and personal possessions. Administrative texts mention various titles and occupations: priests, overseers, merchants, craftspeople, and laborers, indicating a complex social hierarchy. Unlike the relative egalitarianism of village life, urban society created both opportunity for advancement and potential for exploitation. Perhaps most significantly, this era saw the first evidence of institutional inequality. Some tablets record the existence of individuals labeled as slaves or servants, though their precise status remains debated. Certain texts suggest that temple and later palace establishments controlled unfree labor, particularly for agricultural work and construction projects. This institutionalized inequality represented the dark counterpart to the remarkable achievements of early Mesopotamian civilization. As the 4th millennium drew to a close, the Sumerian experiment in urban civilization had proven remarkably successful. The innovations pioneered in southern Mesopotamia spread throughout the region and beyond, setting the stage for the next phase of development: the rise of competing city-states that would define the early dynastic period. As the 3rd millennium before Christ dawned, Mesopotamia entered a new phase in its development. The previous era of urban expansion gave way to intense political fragmentation. The fertile plain between the rivers now hosted numerous competing polities, each centered around a major settlement with its surrounding agricultural lands. These independent centers, among them Kish, Lagash, Umma, and Nippur, functioned as autonomous states with their own rulers, deities, and territorial ambitions. Each metropolis boasted formidable defenses, with massive walls protecting inhabitants from external threats. Administrative buildings, temples, and palaces dominated the central districts, while residential neighborhoods spread outward in dense clusters. Canals ran through these urban landscapes, providing water for domestic use and transportation arteries for goods. The architectural sophistication reflected generations of accumulated expertise in building techniques. The city of Ur, excavated by Leonard Woolley in the 1920s and 1930s, exemplifies these early dynastic centers. Its double wall system enclosed nearly 60 hectares, with the outer wall extending over 4 kilometers in circumference. The massive ziggurat, though largely rebuilt in later periods, rested on early dynastic foundations. Residential quarters revealed densely packed housing along winding streets too narrow for wheeled vehicles. At the city's heart lay the royal cemetery, where excavators uncovered extraordinary evidence of elite wealth and ritual practices, including the famous death pits containing sacrificed retainers accompanying royal burials. Kish, situated in northern Babylonia, claimed special prestige as the city that received kingship from heaven after the mythological flood. Archaeological excavations revealed substantial public architecture, including a palace structure nicknamed the Plano-Convex Building for its distinctive brick shape. The Sumerian king list presents Kish as the site of the first post-Diluvian dynasty, reflecting its ideological importance in early dynastic political thought. Lagash developed into a major political power despite relatively modest urban size. This city-state controlled a productive agricultural region through a network of 3 major settlements: Lagash, Gursu, and Nina. The extraordinary archive of royal inscriptions from Lagash provides unparalleled insight into early dynastic political ideology, military conflicts, and administrative practices. These texts describe boundary disputes with neighboring Umma that erupted into generations of warfare, the best documented conflict from this period. A profound transformation occurred in leadership during this period. Earlier settlements had been governed primarily by temple authorities, priests who mediated between humans and deities. Now, military leaders called Lugals, great men, assumed paramount authority. These rulers initially gained power during conflicts with neighboring communities, then gradually institutionalized their control through dynasties of hereditary succession. The ascendant monarchs legitimized their authority through divine sanction. Royal inscriptions proclaimed their selection by patron deities to rule as earthly representatives. Elaborate coronation rituals reinforced this theological basis for leadership. Kings commissioned monumental architecture, particularly temples and palaces, as visible manifestations of their exalted status. These structures employed skilled craftsmen, costly imported materials, and innovative engineering techniques to inspire awe among subjects and visitors alike. Despite these claims of divine appointment, royal authority remained contested. Noble families wielded significant influence through councils that could check monarchical power. Local shrines maintained some autonomy from central control. This tension between centralized governance and traditional sources of authority created dynamic political environments within each community. The proliferation of independent polities inevitably led to conflict. Commemorative artifacts from this era provide unprecedented documentation of military encounters. The Standard of Uruk, a wooden box decorated with inlaid shell and lapis lazuli, depicts military processions, chariot warfare, and the capture of prisoners. These intricate scenes reveal organized military units with standardized equipment and tactical formations. This remarkable artifact, discovered in a royal tomb at Uruk, measures approximately 20 by 45 centimeters. Its 2 long sides display contrasting scenes of war and peace inlaid with shell, red limestone, and lapis lazuli against a dark background. The war panel shows 4-wheeled battle vehicles trampling enemies, infantry with spears and axes, and the presentation of naked captives to a larger figure, presumably representing the king. The peace panel depicts a royal banquet with attendants bringing animals, fish, and other goods while musicians perform. These vivid images provide invaluable insight into early dynastic military organization, equipment, and the ideological connections between warfare and royal authority. No artifact captures the brutality of early warfare more vividly than the stele of vultures. This limestone monument, commissioned by Eannatum of Lagash around 2450 BC, commemorates victory over neighboring Umma. One side portrays the ruler leading a phalanx of soldiers with spears and heavy shields, trampling fallen enemies beneath their feet. The reverse shows vultures carrying away severed heads of the defeated, a grim image that gives the monument its modern name. The stele details specific territorial disputes between Lagash and Umma concerning a fertile plain called Gutian. Accompanying inscriptions describe divine intervention in the conflict, with Lagash's patron deity Ningirsu appearing to Eannatum in a dream, promising victory. After defeating Umma's forces, Eannatum imposed harsh terms, including tribute payments and the construction of memorial mounds over mass graves of the defeated enemy. The monument combines historical record, religious justification, and political propaganda, characteristic elements of Mesopotamian commemorative art. These conflicts stimulated military innovation. Archaeological evidence reveals increasingly sophisticated weaponry. Copper alloy spearheads replaced earlier stone tips. Helmets and body armor provided protection for elite troops. Composite bows extended the range of projectiles. Military specialists emerged as a distinct social class, receiving land allocations or rations in exchange for service to the ruling authorities. Excavations across Mesopotamia have uncovered specialized military equipment, reflecting growing martial sophistication. The helmet from provides evidence of copper armor for elite soldiers. Mace heads evolved from simple stone spheres to elaborately carved symbols of authority. Standardized spearheads and arrowheads indicate mass production of military equipment. Most significant was the development of the composite bow, constructed from wood, horn, and sinew laminated together, which dramatically increased range and penetrating power compared to simple wooden bows. This weapon would remain the most sophisticated projectile technology in warfare until the invention of gunpowder. Most conflicts centered on agricultural land and water rights. The Stele of Vultures specifically mentions disputed boundary territories along irrigation canals. These precious resources justified bloodshed in a landscape where agricultural productivity determined economic and political survival. Victory brought not only territorial gain, but enhanced prestige for successful monarchs. Warfare's economic impact extended beyond conquest. Captives taken in battle supplied labor for construction projects and agricultural work. Tribute extracted from subjugated territories filled royal treasuries with precious materials and luxury goods. These resources funded further military campaigns in a cycle of competition that dominated inter-city relations. Despite, or perhaps because of, this competitive environment, the early dynastic period witnessed remarkable cultural achievements. Archaeological excavations offer glimpses into daily life during this creative era. Residential districts contained homes ranging from simple single-room dwellings to complex multi-room compounds with internal courtyards. Most families lived in mud brick structures with reed roofs, cooking in central hearths and sleeping on reed mats. Diet consisted primarily of barley bread, supplemented with pulses, vegetables, fish, and occasionally meat. Beer, brewed from barley, served as both staple beverage and important cultural element, consumed in social gatherings and religious ceremonies. Pottery vessels in various sizes and shapes facilitated food preparation, storage, and consumption. Archaeological analysis of plant and animal remains provides detailed information about ancient Mesopotamian cuisine. Barley formed the foundation of the diet, processed into bread and porridge. Dates, apples, and pomegranates added sweetness, while garlic, onions, and leeks contributed flavor. Animal bones indicate consumption of sheep, goats, pigs, and fish, with meat generally reserved for special occasions or elite tables. Dairy products, particularly butter and various cheeses, provided essential fats and protein. Beer came in multiple varieties, from low-alcohol, daily beer, to stronger brews reserved for festivals and religious ceremonies. Leisure activities provided respite from labor. The royal game of discovered in elite tombs, demonstrates the importance of board games in Mesopotamian society. This two-player race game used dice and elaborately decorated playing boards inlaid with shell, lapis lazuli, and red limestone. Such games were not merely entertainment, but venues for social interaction and displays of strategic thinking. The royal game of Ur, excavated from royal tombs dating to approximately 2500 BC, consisted of a wooden board with 20 squares arranged in 3 rows. Players moved pieces according to throws of tetrahedral dice, racing to move their 7 pieces across the board and off again. Certain squares offered protection or required additional throws. The complete rules, reconstructed from a much later Babylonian tablet, reveal a sophisticated game combining chance and strategy. Similar game boards have been found throughout the Near East, indicating the widespread popularity of this leisure activity across social classes and cultures. Women occupied complex social positions during this period. While patriarchal structures predominated, legal tablets reveal women's ability to own property, conduct business transactions, and serve in certain religious roles. Female ownership of textile workshops appears in administrative documents, suggesting economic independence for at least some women. The highest status belonged to women from royal and noble families, who could wield significant influence through family connections. Cuneiform records detail specific legal rights held by women in early dynastic society. Marriage contracts specified mutual obligations between spouses and conditions for divorce. Women could inherit property, including land and slaves, and manage these assets independently. Brewery operation often fell under female control, providing significant economic opportunities. Administrative texts mention female scribes, suggesting access to specialized education for some elite women. Religious institutions employed women as priestesses, particularly in temples dedicated to female deities. While gender inequality remained fundamental to social structure, women maintained greater legal and economic agency than in many later civilizations. Mathematical innovation flourished during this era. The sexagesimal system, based on units of 60, developed as a practical tool for commerce and administration. This mathematical approach allowed precise calculation of areas, volumes, and weights. Clay tablets demonstrate advanced problem-solving techniques, including calculation of square and cube roots and early algebraic methods for solving equations. The sexagesimal system, which originated in the Uruk period, reached mathematical maturity during the early dynastic era. This base 60 numerical system provided remarkable computational flexibility. The sexagesimal legacy survives today in our measurement of time: 60 seconds, 60 minutes. An angular degrees, 360-degree circle, testifying to the enduring impact of Sumerian mathematical innovation. Cuneiform writing reached maturity during this period, evolving from earlier pictographic forms into a sophisticated script of hundreds of wedge-shaped signs. While primarily used for administrative and economic records, scribes began to compose literary texts, religious hymns, and royal inscriptions. The complexity of the writing system required years of training, creating a specialized scribal class who preserved and transmitted cultural knowledge. Excavated scribal schools, called edubas, tablet houses, reveal rigorous educational practices. Students began by learning to shape clay tablets and handle writing styluses properly. Elementary exercises involved copying simple sign lists, progressing to complex vocabulary and bilingual Sumerian Akkadian dictionaries. Advanced training included legal terminology, mathematical calculation, and literary composition. Discipline was strict, with school texts mentioning punishments for errors or misbehavior. This standardized curriculum ensured transmission of cultural knowledge, while creating bonds among the educated elite who staffed administrative institutions throughout Mesopotamia. These cultural achievements, developed amid political fragmentation and frequent warfare, demonstrate the remarkable creativity of early dynastic society. The competitive environment between independent cities drove innovation as each center sought to outshine its rivals through monumental architecture, artistic excellence, and intellectual achievement. The inhabitants of ancient Mesopotamia perceived their world as thoroughly permeated by divine presence. Natural phenomena, social institutions, and human activities all existed within a cosmic order established by supernatural powers. This worldview found expression in an elaborate pantheon of deities who controlled every aspect of earthly existence. At the pinnacle of this divine hierarchy stood four major deities. An, the sky god, represented supreme authority, but remained somewhat remote from human concerns. Enlil, lord of wind and storms, functioned as the active executive of divine will, issuing decrees that shaped cosmic destiny. Enki, master of the freshwater deep, embodied wisdom and crafty intelligence, often intervening to help humanity in times of crisis. Inanna, queen of heaven, governed love, fertility, and warfare, personifying the unpredictable forces of creation and destruction. Beneath these supreme powers, hundreds of lesser deities governed specific domains. Nanna the moon, Utu the sun, Ninhursag the earth, Ninurta agriculture, Gibel fire, and countless others. Each aspect of reality had its divine supervisor, creating a thoroughly animated cosmos where natural phenomena expressed supernatural will. The Sumerians conceived that the gods had established a fundamental cosmic principle called Mi, pronounced Me. These divine powers, or ordinances, structured both natural and social reality, determining how the universe functioned at every level. When properly observed, the Mi ensured harmony between human society and the cosmic order. The creation myth, Enuma Elish, though preserved in later Akkadian versions, contains elements originating in Sumerian cosmology. It describes primordial waters existing before heaven and earth separated. Divine generations emerged from these waters, with younger deities eventually defeating older chaotic powers. The victorious god Marduk, replacing earlier Enlil in some versions, created the physical world from the body of defeated Tiamat, establishing cosmic order through divine combat. This narrative established a universe fundamentally shaped by divine will and power struggles, where stability required constant maintenance through proper religious observance. Creation myths explained humanity's place within this divine scheme. According to one tradition, humans were fashioned from clay, mixed with the blood of a slain god, creating beings who contained both divine essence and earthly substance. Another account describes humans made specifically to relieve the gods of labor, serving as divine workforces who would maintain temples, offer sacrifices, and perform the ritual work necessary to sustain cosmic order. The myth of Atrahasis details humanity's creation as a solution to divine labor problems. Lower-ranking gods had rebelled against their work, digging irrigation canals and maintaining cosmic infrastructure. In response, Enki and the mother goddess Nintu created humans from clay, mixed with the blood of a sacrificed god, forming beings to perform necessary labor in divine service. This narrative established humanity's fundamental purpose, maintaining divine service through religious practice and productive work. Later, when humans multiplied and became too noisy, the gods sent disasters to reduce their numbers, establishing mortality as a check on human population. These mythological frameworks established humanity's essential purpose: to serve the gods through proper worship and adherence to divine ordinances. This relationship was not viewed as exploitation, but as participation in a necessary cosmic partnership. By fulfilling their ordained role, humans ensured continued divine favor, which manifested as agricultural fertility, political stability, and protection from natural disasters. The temples stood at the center of Mesopotamian religious practice. Each major settlement featured monumental sacred complexes dedicated to local patron deities. These structures evolved from simple shrines to elaborate multi-room buildings, culminating in the massive stepped platforms that would later develop into classic ziggurats. These sacred precincts functioned as divine households, where deities dwelled among their human servants. Daily rituals included washing and clothing divine statues, presenting food offerings, and performing elaborate purification ceremonies. Professional priests and priestesses maintained constant ritual activity, ensuring uninterrupted divine presence within the community. The daily ritual cycle began before dawn, when priests opened temple doors with purification ceremonies. Morning offerings included bread, meat, beer, and incense presented to the deity's statue, understood not as mere representation, but as the god's physical manifestation on earth. Midday brought another meal service, with afternoons dedicated to administrative duties, managing temple resources. Evening rituals closed the day with further offerings, hymns, and prayers before the sanctuary was sealed for the night. This perpetual cycle of divine service maintained cosmic order while distributing agricultural surpluses through the temple economic system. Temple architecture reflected the cosmic hierarchy. The innermost sanctuary housed the divine image, accessible only to high-ranking religious personnel. Outer courtyards allowed broader participation in public ceremonies. The elevation of temples on platforms or artificial mounds symbolized the liminal space between earth and heaven, enhancing communication between human and divine realms. Beyond these official institutions, personal religious experience operated at household level. Archaeological excavations reveal small shrines in private dwellings, with figurines representing protective deities or ancestors. Families conducted domestic rituals to ensure divine protection for their households. Personal gods served as intermediaries between individuals and the greater cosmic powers, particularly in times of crisis or need. Household religious practice centered around family deities, who served as personal intermediaries with the greater gods. Archaeological evidence includes small clay figurines of protective spirits and deities found beneath house floors. Families maintained household altars for daily offerings and prayers. Birth, marriage, and death involved specific domestic rituals, ensuring divine protection during these critical transitions. Household religious practices created spiritual security within the unpredictable Mesopotamian environment, where illness, flooding, or conflict could strike without warning. Divination practices provided crucial communication channels with supernatural forces. Trained specialists interpreted natural phenomena as divine communications. The patterns of oil droplets in water, the configurations of smoke from burning incense, or the markings on animal livers from sacrifices. These techniques allowed humans to discern divine will and adjust their actions accordingly, maintaining harmony with cosmic order. The most sophisticated divination method involved examining sheep livers, hepatoscopy, based on the belief that deities inscribed their messages on the organs of sacrificial animals. Diviners classified and interpreted features like protuberances, coloration, and the condition of the gallbladder according to systematic principles preserved in extensive technical manuals. Other methods included astrology, interpreting celestial movements, lecanomancy, oil patterns on water, libanomancy, smoke patterns, and oniromancy, dream interpretation. These diverse techniques provided spiritual technology for navigating uncertain futures through divine guidance. Religious festivals punctuated the calendar with cycles of celebration and renewal. The New Year festival, Akitu, featured elaborate ceremonies including ritual combat, divine marriage, and recitation of creation myths. These communal events reinvigorated cosmic order and reaffirmed the relationship between human society and divine powers. In these moments of sacred time, participants experienced direct connection with primordial events that structured their reality. The Akitu festival, celebrated at the spring equinox, represented the year's most important religious observation. This 12-day ceremony included ritual cleansing of temples, a symbolic humiliation and restoration of the king, recitation of the Enuma Elish creation epic, and a sacred marriage ceremony, hierogamy, between the ruler and a priestess representing Inanna. During this period, normal social boundaries temporarily dissolved, with ritualized role reversals and carnivalesque elements. The festival culminated in a procession of divine statues through the city, followed by feasting and celebration. This complex ritual cycle renewed cosmic order, legitimized royal authority, and strengthened community bonds through shared religious experience. The religious worldview of ancient Mesopotamia found profound expression through literary composition. Professional scribes crafted sophisticated texts, exploring the relationship between humanity and divine powers. These works, impressed on clay tablets, constitute the world's earliest literature. The poet Enheduanna stands as a remarkable figure in this literary tradition. Daughter of Sargon of Akkad and high priestess of the moon god at Ur, she composed powerful hymns to the goddess Inanna around 2300 BC. Her works bear her personal signature, the first known author in human history. In verses of stunning emotional intensity, she explored divine power and human vulnerability, establishing literary traditions that would influence generations of later composers. Enheduanna's most famous composition, the Exaltation of Inanna, Ninmeshara, describes her personal suffering during political upheaval and her appeal to the goddess for restoration. The text combines autobiography, political commentary, and religious devotion in sophisticated literary form. Her collection of temple hymns systematically describes 42 sacred sites throughout Mesopotamia, creating a literary geography of divine presence. Enheduanna's work demonstrates remarkable poetic technique, including effective use of metaphor, parallelism, and repetition. Her literary voice, personal, passionate, and politically engaged, establishes her as world literature's founding figure. The most renowned literary work from this period, the Epic of Gilgamesh, confronted profound questions about mortality and meaning. Though compiled in its classic form during later periods, the narrative originated in Sumerian tales about a historical ruler of Uruk. The epic follows its protagonist's journey from arrogant youth to wisdom, culminating in his failed quest for immortality. This masterpiece addressed the fundamental human condition, the tension between extraordinary achievement and inevitable death. This epic follows the semi-divine king Gilgamesh, who terrorizes his city until the gods create a wild man, Enkidu, as his equal. After an initial combat, the two become inseparable friends and undertake heroic adventures together. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh is devastated by grief and the realization of his own mortality. He journeys to the edge of the world seeking Utnapishtim, survivor of the Great Flood who received immortality from the gods. Despite locating the flood survivor and briefly obtaining a plant of rejuvenation, Gilgamesh ultimately fails to secure eternal life. He returns to Uruk, accepting mortality, while taking pride in his city's walls and civilization's achievements. finding meaning in cultural legacy rather than personal immortality. Religious poetry formed another significant literary genre. Temple hymns celebrated divine attributes and sacred places. Lamentations mourned destroyed cities and temples, interpreting catastrophe as divine abandonment. Mythological narratives recounted the adventures and conflicts of deities, explaining natural phenomena and social institutions through sacred stories. The myth of Inanna's descent to the underworld exemplifies the sophistication of Sumerian mythological literature. This dramatic narrative describes the goddess's journey to the realm of her sister, Ereshkigal, Queen of the Dead. Inanna must pass through 7 gates, surrendering a divine power at each one, until she arrives naked and powerless before her sister. Struck dead and hung on a hook, Inanna can only return to the upper world when her clever servant Ninshubur secures divine intervention. Her resurrection comes with a condition: she must provide a replacement in the underworld, ultimately selecting her faithless husband Dumuzi. This complex tale explores themes of divine power, cosmic boundaries, sacrifice, and renewal through vivid imagery and psychological insight. These compositions were not merely aesthetic creations, but practical tools in maintaining cosmic order. Public recitation of myths during festivals renewed the events they described. Lamentations served as spiritual technology to restore divine favor. Hymns activated divine presence in temple rituals. Literature functioned as a vital component in the complex relationship between human society and supernatural powers. The literary achievements of Mesopotamian civilization preserved religious concepts, historical events, and cultural values for future generations. These texts provide remarkable insight into how ancient peoples understood their world and their place within it. Through these written works, modern readers can glimpse the intellectual and spiritual landscape of humanity's first civilization. Amidst the kaleidoscope of competing city-states, a transformative figure emerged to reshape Mesopotamian political geography. This charismatic leader, born in obscurity, would forge history's first true empire. The dramatic narrative of his origins set the stage for his unprecedented achievements. According to legend, this child of humble birth was placed in a reed basket and set adrift on the Euphrates, a tale that would echo through millennia in similar stories of abandoned infants destined for greatness. Found and raised by a royal gardener, he rose through the ranks to become cupbearer to the king of Kish, gaining intimate access to the mechanisms of power. The legend of Sargon's birth appears in a first-person autobiographical text. My mother was a high priestess. My father I knew not. My mother conceived me. In secret she bore me. She set me in a basket of rushes. With bitumen she sealed my lid. She cast me into the river, which rose not over me. This origin story established divine favor as the foundation for his remarkable rise to power. Whether historical or propagandistic, the narrative effectively legitimized rule by someone lacking traditional royal ancestry, creating a powerful template for later usurpers throughout history. From this strategic position, the ambitious young man, who called himself Sargon, meaning legitimate king, orchestrated a coup against his royal master. Having secured control of Kish, he turned his formidable military talents against the other Sumerian city-states. One by one, the great urban centers fell to his disciplined forces. Even mighty Uruk, with its massive defensive walls, could not withstand his innovative siege tactics. Sargon's military campaigns, commemorated in later literature and contemporary inscriptions, employed unprecedented scale and organization. His forces reportedly numbered 5,400 men who ate bread daily before him. suggesting a standing professional army rather than seasonal militia. This military innovation gave him decisive advantage over city-states relying on citizen soldiers. The conquest of Uruk and capture of its king, Lugal-Zagesi, who had previously unified southern Mesopotamia, marked a crucial victory. Sargon humiliated his defeated rival by parading him in a neck stock to the gate of Enlil's temple at Nippur, a powerful symbolic statement of divine favor transferring to the new ruler. Within a generation, Sargon's conquests extended far beyond traditional Sumerian territory. His armies marched victorious through the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, across the Syrian plateau, into Anatolia, and possibly as far as the Mediterranean coast. Administrative documents suggest his influence reached into present-day Iran and beyond. These campaigns created a territorial state encompassing diverse geographical regions and ethnic populations. Royal inscriptions claim Sargon made tributary the lands from the Upper Sea to the Lower Sea, the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. Archaeological evidence confirms Akkadian presence throughout northern Mesopotamia, with imperial administrative centers established at strategic locations. Trade networks secured access to precious materials: cedar from Lebanon, silver from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. The empire's geographical extent required innovative systems for communication and control across vast distances, including standardized weights and measures, imperial road systems, and provincial administrators loyal to the central authority. Most remarkably, this conqueror succeeded where others had failed, in transforming temporary military dominance into stable imperial rule. By installing loyal followers as governors in conquered territories and requiring their sons to be educated at his court, he created administrative linkages that bound distant regions to his central authority. This system of governance provided a blueprint for later empires across the ancient world. The newly forged imperial system required innovative administrative solutions to function effectively. Traditional methods of governance developed for individual city-states proved inadequate for managing territories spanning multiple ecological zones and linguistic groups. To address these challenges, imperial administrators developed standardized accounting practices, weights, and measures to coordinate economic activity across vast distances. Uniform bureaucratic procedures facilitated communication between the capital and provincial centers. Royal inspectors traveled throughout the realm, ensuring compliance with imperial directives. These administrative innovations overcame the limitations of distance and diversity that had constrained earlier political formations. The Akkadian achievement in standardization appears most visibly in weights and measures found throughout imperial territories. Standard weight stones bearing imperial inscriptions and official markings ensured commercial transactions followed consistent rules regardless of local tradition. Royal officials used standard volume measures to assess taxation, eliminating regional disparities that might favor certain provinces. Distance measuring systems facilitated construction projects and communications across the empire's vast territory. These practical innovations created an integrated economic space unprecedented in human history. Trade networks expanded dramatically under imperial sponsorship. Merchants enjoyed the security of standardized laws and protection along major routes. Commercial contacts extended to the Indus Valley, Persian Gulf, Anatolia, and possibly Egypt. Exotic materials, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, copper from Oman, gold from Anatolia, flowed into the imperial heartland, fueling artistic and architectural achievements. Archaeological evidence of this trade expansion includes distinctive Akkadian cylinder seals found throughout the Near East and beyond. Inscriptions boast that ships from Meluha, the Indus Valley, Magan, Oman, and Dilmun, Bahrain, docked at the quays of Akkad. Analysis of metal artifacts reveals increasing use of tin bronze, an alloy requiring tin from distant sources in Afghanistan or Central Asia. This long-distance trade enriched imperial coffers through customs duties, while providing essential raw materials for monumental architecture and luxury goods that enhanced royal prestige. The multilingual character of the empire necessitated sophisticated cultural policies. While the conquering elite spoke Akkadian, a Semitic language distinct from Sumerian, imperial authorities maintained the prestige of ancient Sumerian traditions. Scribal schools continued teaching Sumerian alongside Akkadian. Religious centers received imperial patronage, regardless of linguistic affiliation. This cultural pluralism allowed diverse populations to maintain local identities while participating in the broader imperial system. Artistic expression during the Akkadian period reached unprecedented heights of naturalism and dynamism. The famous victory stele of Naram Sin, Sargon's grandson, depicts the ruler climbing a mountain over fallen enemies, wearing a horned crown traditionally reserved for deities. Visual evidence of imperial ideology elevating kings to semi-divine status. Cylinder seals from this period show remarkable technical sophistication, with finely carved combat scenes and mythological narratives. These artistic innovations reflected the cosmopolitan atmosphere of imperial cities, where diverse cultural traditions could cross-fertilize and inspire new creative developments. Most significantly, the empire fostered unprecedented cultural exchange between previously isolated regions. Artistic motifs, technological innovations, and religious concepts circulated across traditional boundaries. This cross-fertilization stimulated creative developments in everything, from literature to metallurgy. The cosmopolitan atmosphere of imperial cities created dynamic environments where diverse traditions could interact and influence one another. Despite these achievements, the imperial structure contained inherent vulnerabilities. Maintaining control over such vast territories required constant military vigilance, draining resources from productive sectors. Provincial elites resented central authority, particularly taxation demands. Rebellions erupted periodically, requiring costly suppression campaigns. These internal tensions created ongoing challenges for imperial administration. The reign of Naram Sin, Sargon's grandson, revealed these mounting pressures. Despite military success commemorated in triumphant monuments, inscriptions mention increasingly frequent rebellions requiring royal intervention. The Great Revolt united multiple cities against imperial authority, nearly toppling the regime before Naram Sin reasserted control through military force. These internal conflicts consumed resources and disrupted the economic integration that had fueled imperial prosperity. Administrative texts from late in his reign show increasing demands for tribute and labor service, suggesting economic strain despite outward displays of imperial power. Archaeological evidence suggests these political stresses coincided with a catastrophic environmental shift. Around 2200 BC, the region experienced what scientists now call the 4.2 kiloyear event, a period of severe drought lasting several decades. Sediment cores from the Persian Gulf and pollen samples from regional lakes indicate dramatically reduced rainfall during this period. This climatic disruption struck a civilization dependent on irrigation agriculture with devastating consequences. Modern paleoclimatic research reveals this drought affected regions from the Aegean to the Indus Valley, triggering civilizational collapse across multiple societies simultaneously. Analysis of deep-sea cores from the Gulf of Oman shows dramatically increased dust levels, indicating severe aridification. Archaeological surveys in northern Mesopotamia document site abandonment rates exceeding 75% during this period, with settlement patterns showing population movement from dry farming regions to river valleys. Agricultural systems optimized for previous climate conditions proved unable to sustain production under these changed circumstances. As drought conditions intensified, crop yields plummeted throughout the empire. Canal systems, lacking sufficient water, fell into disrepair. Food shortages led to population decline in major urban centers. Tax revenues decreased, undermining imperial capacity to maintain administrative control and military readiness. This environmental catastrophe exposed and exacerbated the structural weaknesses of the imperial system. A literary text known as The Curse of Akkad dramatically describes this period of ecological and political collapse. For the first time since cities were built and founded, the great agricultural tracts produced no grain. All the foreign lands under the sun produced no grain. The large fields and orchards produced no fruit, no new plants grew. While containing mythological elements attributing the disaster to divine punishment for Naram-Sin's religious transgressions, this composition preserves cultural memory of the devastating environmental conditions that contributed to imperial collapse. The combined pressures of internal rebellion, environmental degradation, and agricultural failure created optimal conditions for external invasion. Mountain peoples from the northeastern Zagros region, known as Gutians, launched increasingly successful raids into imperial territories. Initially little more than a nuisance, these tribal warriors encountered diminishing resistance as imperial military capability declined. The Gutians, described in Mesopotamian texts as an uncivilized people who know no inhibitions and have human intelligence but canine instincts, exploited the empire's weakened condition. Their raids targeted vulnerable settlements and disrupted already strained communication routes. Unlike earlier threats that imperial armies had contained at the frontiers, these mountain warriors penetrated deep into the Mesopotamian heartland. With insufficient resources to maintain both internal control and frontier defense, imperial authorities faced impossible strategic choices. Around 2190 BC, the imperial capital fell to these mountain warriors. The sophisticated political structure built over generations collapsed with remarkable speed. Cities previously connected by imperial networks found themselves isolated and vulnerable. The brief but brilliant experiment in imperial organization gave way to fragmentation and localism as Gutian warbands established dominance over the former imperial heartland. The arrival of Gutian warriors marked a profound disruption in Mesopotamian political and economic life. These semi-nomadic peoples from the northeastern highlands possessed no tradition of urban administration. Their rule manifested primarily as extractive overlordship rather than coherent governance. A later Sumerian king list dismissively notes that they ruled with no understanding of order. Mesopotamian literary tradition preserved harsh judgments of Gutian rule. The composition Lamentation over the destruction of Sumer and Ur describes them as dragons of the mountain, people who know no submission, with human faces but canine instincts and monkey features. The Sumerian king list records 21 Gutian rulers, but adds they governed from tents rather than proper palaces, emphasizing their perceived barbarism. While undoubtedly influenced by later propaganda, these texts reflect the cultural discontinuity experienced during this disruptive interlude. Under these conditions, long-distance trade networks collapsed. Archaeological evidence reveals sharp declines in imported luxury goods and reduced volume of regional exchange. Urban centers contracted, with populations dispersing to rural areas to escape taxation and conscription. Monumental construction halted as resources previously channeled through imperial institutions disappeared. The sophisticated interconnections of the imperial period gave way to localized subsistence strategies. Archaeological layers corresponding to this period show clear evidence of urban decline. Public buildings went unrepaired. Streets accumulated debris without municipal cleaning. Residential quarters contracted as houses were abandoned. Trade goods that had flowed through imperial networks, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, tin from distant sources, exotic woods and stones, virtually disappear from the material record. Local ceramic styles replaced the standardized imperial forms, indicating breakdown of economic integration. The archaeological signature reflects a civilization in retreat from previous complexity toward localized self-sufficiency. Despite political fragmentation, cultural continuity persisted through established institutions. Temple complexes maintained religious practices and preserved literary traditions. Scribal schools, though reduced in scale, continued transmitting the knowledge accumulated over centuries. Local authorities adapted to changing circumstances, developing smaller-scale governance models suited to more limited resources. These resilient cultural institutions ensured that the achievements of earlier periods would survive through this challenging interlude. The Temple of Inanna at Nippur, one of Mesopotamia's most sacred religious centers, provides archaeological evidence of this cultural continuity. Despite political chaos, ritual offerings continued according to traditional patterns. Scribal activity persisted, with texts showing careful copying of older literary compositions. Religious personnel maintained their traditional roles and responsibilities despite diminished economic resources. These institutions, embedded in local communities and supported by theological imperatives, proved more durable than imperial political structures dependent on military power and administrative control. In several southern cities, native dynasties began reasserting independence from Gutian overlords. The archaeological record indicates gradual restoration of urban infrastructure, rehabilitation of irrigation systems, and revival of local craft production. From these centers of resistance, particularly the ancient religious center of Uruk, emerged military leaders determined to expel the foreign occupiers and restore Mesopotamian civilization. Their efforts would culminate in the remarkable resurgence known as the Neo-Sumerian period. The most successful resistance developed under Utu-Hagal of Uruk, who compiled an alliance of southern cities tired of Gutian exactions. His victory inscription records a campaign against the Gutian leader Interregnum, describing the liberation movement in religious terms as restoration of divine favor. According to the text, Utu-Hagal made supplications to the gods Inanna and Dumuzi, who granted him victory as divine champion of Mesopotamian civilization against barbaric mountain peoples. This theological framing would characterize subsequent Neo-Sumerian political ideology, presenting native rulers as divinely appointed restorers of proper cosmic and social order. The liberation of Mesopotamia from Gutian control began with Utu-Hagal of Uruk, who defeated the mountain peoples in decisive battle. However, his triumph proved short-lived. Power soon passed to his former governor of Ur, an ambitious leader named Ur-Nammu, who established a dynasty that would oversee a remarkable civilizational renaissance. Ur-Nammu's military campaigns systematically reunified the former imperial territories. City by city, province by province, his forces re-established central authority throughout Sumer and Akkad. These conquests differed from earlier imperial expansion in their ideological framing. Ur-Nammu presented himself not as foreign conqueror, but as restorer of authentic Mesopotamian tradition, legitimizing his rule through appeals to shared cultural heritage. Royal inscriptions emphasize Ur-Nammu's role in restoring divine favor after the Gutian disruption. One text describes how he established freedom for the peoples of Sumer and Akkad by removing foreign oppressors. Another records his restoration of international trade. The roads that had been blocked up, I cleared for traffic. I removed the tolls. Archaeological evidence confirms renewed construction activity throughout southern Mesopotamia, with rehabilitation of irrigation systems and public buildings neglected during the Gutian interlude. This reconstruction program included both practical infrastructure and symbolic monuments establishing the new dynasty's legitimacy. No monument better symbolized this restoration than the great ziggurat of Ur. This massive stepped platform, rising over 30 meters above the surrounding plain, combined innovative engineering with traditional religious symbolism. Built of millions of mud bricks with an outer skin of baked bricks set in bitumen, its monumentality proclaimed the renewed power of Mesopotamian civilization. The structure established an architectural template that would influence sacred buildings throughout the region for centuries to come. The ziggurat's construction represented extraordinary investment of resources and labor. The core consisted of an estimated 720,000 baked bricks, each weighing about 15 kilograms, with millions more sun-dried bricks forming the interior mass. Drainage systems protected the structure from water damage, with carefully engineered channels directing rainfall away from the massive brick platform. 3 monumental staircases converged at the first level, with a single central staircase ascending to the temple crowning the summit. This architectural masterpiece made visible statement about renewed political authority, economic capacity, and religious legitimacy under the new dynasty. Ur-Nammu's most enduring achievement lay in the legal sphere. His famous law code, predating Hammurabi's better-known compilation by 3 centuries, established consistent legal principles throughout his realm. The surviving fragments address issues ranging from family law to commercial regulations, specifying graduated penalties based on the severity of offenses. This systematic approach to justice represented a significant advance in governmental theory and practice, balancing central authority with predictable legal procedures. The Code of Ur-Nammu begins with a prologue, establishing divine authorization for the king's judicial authority. The laws themselves use conditional formulations. If a man commits X, then Y shall be done to him. Topics covered include homicide, sexual offenses, false testimony, agriculture, and slavery. Unlike later Babylonian law, which frequently prescribed death or mutilation, Ur-Nammu's code primarily imposed monetary compensation for injuries. This preference for restitution over retribution suggests a sophisticated understanding of law's social function. The code's implementation throughout the realm created unprecedented legal uniformity, facilitating commerce and strengthening central authority, while protecting individuals from arbitrary treatment. The accession of Ur-Nammu's son, Shulgi, initiated a remarkable 48-year reign that would become synonymous with effective governance and cultural flourishing. This monarch combined military prowess with administrative genius, creating governmental systems of unprecedented sophistication. Shulgi's bureaucracy established new standards for organizational efficiency. The empire was divided into administrative provinces governed by officials directly responsible to the royal court. Standardized record-keeping practices ensured consistent taxation and resource allocation throughout the realm. Royal messengers carried communications along a highway system connecting major centers. Most impressively, a complex redistributive economy moved agricultural goods from productive regions to administrative centers, and then to areas of need or specialized production. The administrative archive from the provincial capital of Umma illustrates this bureaucratic sophistication. Thousands of tablets record grain shipments, labor assignments, livestock management, and taxation with remarkable precision. Officials categorized agricultural land according to productive capacity, calculated expected yields based on systematic formulas, and assigned appropriate tax obligations. Labor crews received specific work assignments with daily quotas. Messengers traveled fixed routes on regular schedules, carrying administrative communications and material goods. This documentation reveals a governmental apparatus operating with mathematical precision across a complex economic landscape. Taxation operated with mathematical precision. Royal officials assessed fields according to systematic formulas, calculating expected yields and corresponding tax obligations. Labor requirements for public works were similarly quantified, with clear specifications for work units and time allocations. This quantitative approach to governance allowed more efficient resource utilization than any previous administrative system. The Bala tax system represented the most sophisticated element of Neo-Sumerian administration. This rotational obligation required each province to support the central government for a specified period annually, providing agricultural products, manufactured goods, and labor service according to carefully calculated quotas. Provincial governors maintained extensive documentation tracking these obligations, which royal inspectors verified to prevent corruption. This system distributed economic burdens equitably while ensuring continuous support for central institutions, regardless of seasonal agricultural cycles. The mathematical precision and organizational complexity of this arrangement exceeded anything previously seen in human governance. Alongside these practical innovations, Shulgi fostered a renaissance of literature and scholarship. The monarch himself claimed literacy in both Sumerian and Akkadian, composing hymns celebrating his achievements. Royal patronage supported the collection and preservation of older texts alongside creation of new compositions. The standardization of the Sumerian literary canon during this period ensured the survival of works that might otherwise have been lost to history. Royal propaganda presented Shulgi as the ideal king, warrior, scholar, athlete, and divine intermediary. Self-praise hymns, likely composed by court poets but attributed to the king himself, describe extraordinary accomplishments. I am a knowledgeable scribe of Nisaba, goddess of writing. I know the ancestral language, Sumerian. I can resolve difficult arithmetical problems. One hymn claims he ran from Nippur to Ur, approximately 160 kilometers, and back in a single day to officiate at religious festivals in both cities. These compositions established royal ideology, emphasizing the king's superhuman capabilities and divine favor, while promoting cultural values of literacy, physical prowess, and piety. Education received particular emphasis under Shulgi's administration. The Aduba tablet house system trained new generations of scribes through rigorous curriculum. Students progressed from basic sign memorization through increasingly complex textual exercises. Advanced training included mathematics, legal terminology, and literary composition. This educational system produced the administrative experts needed to operate the sophisticated bureaucracy while simultaneously preserving cultural traditions. Archaeological evidence of scribal education includes exercise tablets showing characteristic patterns of student work. sign lists, model contracts, multiplication tables, and literary excerpts with corrections. Excavated school buildings reveal classroom arrangements with benches for students and platforms for instructors. Texts describing school life mention strict discipline, with physical punishment for errors or misbehavior. The curriculum combined practical administrative training with cultural indoctrination, ensuring graduates possessed both technical skills and appropriate ideological orientation. This educational system produced the administrators, accountants, and record keepers who maintained Neo-Sumerian governance while preserving literary and religious traditions. The stability and prosperity of the Neo-Sumerian period allowed remarkable advances across multiple fields of knowledge. Medical texts from this era reveal sophisticated understanding of anatomy, disease processes, and treatment approaches. Physicians recognized the distinction between supernatural and natural causation, applying different therapeutic strategies accordingly. Pharmaceutical prescriptions combined plant, mineral, and animal substances into complex formulations tailored to specific conditions. These medical traditions established foundations for healing practices that would influence subsequent Mesopotamian and eventually Greek medicine. Medical knowledge appears in cuneiform tablets categorizing diseases according to affected body parts and symptoms. Therapeutic approaches included herbal remedies with precisely specified preparation methods, surgical procedures described with anatomical accuracy, and ritual interventions addressing supernatural causes. The diagnostic handbook tradition, though preserved in later copies, originated during this period of systematic knowledge organization. These texts reveal sophisticated understanding of observable symptom patterns and their prognostic significance. This empirical approach to medicine, combining practical observation with theoretical framework, established intellectual foundations that would influence medical practice for millennia. Brewing technology achieved particular refinement during this period. Archaeological evidence and textual sources document multiple beer varieties with different strengths, flavors, and production methods. This beverage served not merely as refreshment, but as important nutritional supplement, religious offering, and economic commodity. The standardization of brewing processes indicates sophisticated understanding of fermentation biology, centuries before formal scientific investigation of these processes. Administrative texts record over 20 distinct beer varieties produced in temple and palace breweries, with different barley-to-water ratios, fermentation times, and flavoring ingredients. Brewing operations employed specifically trained personnel working in dedicated facilities with specialized equipment. Beer functioned as payment for workers, offering both hydration and calories in an easily transportable form. Religious ceremonies required particular beer types for different deities and occasions. This production system represented significant investment of agricultural resources, with brewing consuming approximately 1/3 of the barley crop in some regions. Astronomical observation reached new levels of precision under Neo-Sumerian scholars. Systematic recording of celestial phenomena allowed recognition of cyclic patterns in lunar phases, planetary movements, and seasonal markers. These observations facilitated development of increasingly accurate calendrical systems, coordinating lunar months with the solar year. Astronomical knowledge served both practical functions, regulating agricultural activities and religious festivals, and divinatory purposes, as celestial events were interpreted as divine communications. The lunar calendar developed sophisticated intercalation methods, adding an extra month 7 times within a 19-year cycle to synchronize with the solar year. Astronomical diaries recorded planetary positions, eclipses, and unusual celestial phenomena, establishing observational datasets spanning generations. Star catalogues organized visible celestial bodies into constellations, many of which would later influence Greek astronomical terminology. These systematic observations laid foundations for mathematical astronomy that would later flourish in Babylonian and Hellenistic traditions, establishing the observational base for all subsequent Western astronomical development. The period witnessed unprecedented documentation of accumulated knowledge. Palace and temple archives contained thousands of clay tablets organizing information on subjects ranging from sheep breeding to celestial omens. The famous Gish.Hur plates described standardized procedures for various crafts and administrative tasks. This systematic preservation of knowledge created reference libraries that later civilizations would draw upon, ensuring continuity of Mesopotamian intellectual traditions. The royal library at Nippur contained thousands of cuneiform tablets arranged by subject in labeled containers. Scribes created catalog systems indexing these collections for easier reference. Court specialists compiled comprehensive reference works on topics like lexicography, mathematics, and divination. This knowledge management system allowed preservation and transmission of information across generations, despite clay tablets' inherent fragility. The institutional commitment to maintaining these collections reflects recognition of knowledge's value as both practical resource and cultural patrimony. Even seemingly mundane economic activities reflected sophisticated conceptual frameworks. The standardization of weights and measures throughout the empire facilitated commerce while demonstrating advanced understanding of mathematical relationships. Silver served as standard value measure, enabling complex transactions involving diverse commodities. Contract tablets specified detailed conditions for loans, partnerships, and commercial ventures, revealing sophisticated legal and economic thinking that would influence subsequent commercial practices throughout the Near East. The advanced economic system operated through integrated markets, standardized exchange ratios, and sophisticated credit mechanisms. Merchants conducted trade expeditions over hundreds of kilometers, financing operations through investment partnerships with detailed profit-sharing agreements. Interest-bearing loans functioned as capital formation mechanism, while forward contracts allowed risk management in agricultural production. Specialized commercial courts resolved disputes according to customary mercantile practices. This commercial sophistication facilitated economic integration across diverse regions while generating wealth that supported cultural flourishing. The elaborate administrative structure of the Neo-Sumerian state contained seeds of its own destruction. The centralized bureaucracy, while efficient at resource extraction, placed heavy demands on agricultural producers. Tax burdens and labor requirements left rural populations vulnerable to environmental disruptions. Archaeological evidence suggests increasing salinization of agricultural lands due to intensive irrigation, gradually reducing productivity despite sophisticated farming techniques. Analysis of soil samples from southern Mesopotamia reveals progressive salt accumulation during the late 3rd millennium BC. The irrigation systems that made agriculture possible in this arid region gradually raised the water table, bringing dissolved minerals to the surface where evaporation concentrated them. Crop yields declined as salt concentrations exceeded tolerance thresholds for barley and wheat. Farmers adapted by switching to more salt-tolerant barley varieties and leaving heavily affected fields fallow. But these measures provided only temporary solutions to a progressive problem. The environmental sustainability challenges faced by late Sumerian civilization foreshadowed issues that would affect many subsequent intensive agricultural societies. These internal stresses coincided with renewed external pressure. The Elamites from the eastern highlands, long rivals of Mesopotamian powers, launched increasingly aggressive campaigns against border provinces. Simultaneously, Amorite pastoralists from Syria infiltrated agricultural areas, initially as seasonal workers, but gradually establishing permanent settlements. These combined pressures stretched military resources beyond sustainable limits. Administrative texts from the late reign of Ibbi-Sin, last king of the Ur Dynasty, document increasing difficulty maintaining territorial integrity. Provincial governors reported inability to repel Amorite incursions without reinforcements that never arrived. Communication between the capital and outlying regions became intermittent as security deteriorated. Letters describe grain shipments interrupted by hostile forces, preventing adequate provisioning of urban centers. These practical challenges undermined the centralized economic system that had sustained Neo-Sumerian prosperity. The final blow came in 2004 BC, when Elamite forces sacked the capital city of Ur. Cuneiform accounts describe the devastation in vivid terms: temples desecrated, walls breached, people carried into slavery. The Lament for Ur, a poetic composition mourning this catastrophe, portrays the city's guardian deity abandoning her shrine like a bird fleeing its nest. This evocative text captures the psychological impact of political collapse on a population that had equated their social order with cosmic harmony. The lament describes Ur's fall in harrowing detail. The city is destroyed, the people groan. In its boulevards where the feast days were celebrated, dead bodies are lying about. In its avenues where the dances were held, they are viciously attacked. This poetic composition not only mourned the physical destruction, but interpreted it theologically as divine abandonment. Nana, moon god, has abandoned his city. Its people are as if they had never lived there. The text exemplifies the Mesopotamian understanding of political catastrophe as symptom of cosmic disorder, requiring ritual lamentation to restore divine favor. The fall of Ur marked the end of Sumerian political dominance, though many cities continued to exist, often with significant populations. They no longer functioned as independent power centers. Political authority shifted northward to Amorite dynasties, establishing new capitals at Isin, Larsa, and eventually Babylon. These rulers adopted many elements of Mesopotamian cultural tradition, while introducing distinctive innovations reflective of their different cultural origins. The most visible marker of this transition appeared in language patterns. While Sumerian had persisted as administrative and liturgical language throughout the Imperial and Neo-Sumerian periods, Akkadian increasingly dominated everyday communication. By about 1800 BC, Sumerian survived primarily as a scholarly and religious language, similar to Latin in medieval Europe. This linguistic shift reflected broader cultural changes as Amorite populations integrated into Mesopotamian society, bringing new perspectives and traditions. Sociolinguistic evidence from personal names, correspondence, and legal documents demonstrates the acceleration of this language transition after Ur's fall. While administrative records continued using Sumerian terminology and formulas, conversational language increasingly favored Akkadian and Amorite dialects. Bilingualism characterized the transitional period, with inscriptional evidence showing rulers comfortable in multiple linguistic traditions. Scribal schools adapted by teaching Sumerian as classical language alongside vernacular Akkadian, creating educational practices that emphasized cultural preservation while accommodating practical communication needs. Political leadership passed definitively to Amorite dynasties. These rulers legitimized their authority by adopting traditional Mesopotamian royal ideology while maintaining distinctive tribal identities. The most successful among them, Hammurabi of Babylon, would eventually reunify much of the former Sumerian territory under northern leadership. His famous law code, though written in Akkadian, drew heavily on earlier Sumerian legal traditions. The Amorite political integration strategy combined adoption of Mesopotamian royal symbols with maintenance of tribal kinship networks. Kings presented themselves in traditional iconography on monuments while emphasizing patriarchal descent in genealogical records. They patronized established temple cults while introducing Western Semitic deities into the pantheon. This cultural synthesis created legitimacy with both urban populations accustomed to Mesopotamian traditions and tribal groups maintaining Amorite identity. The success of this approach enabled Amorite dynasties to restore political stability after the turmoil following Ur's collapse. Despite these political transitions, remarkable cultural continuity persisted. Temples continued maintaining ancient religious practices. Scribal schools preserved and transmitted Sumerian literature alongside newer Akkadian compositions. Mathematical, astronomical, and medical knowledge developed during earlier periods remained in active use. This cultural resilience ensured that Sumerian achievements would continue influencing subsequent Near Eastern civilizations long after Sumerian political independence had disappeared. Archaeological excavations at sites like Nippur reveal this cultural continuity in material form. Despite political shifts, temple complexes maintained traditional architectural forms and ritual practices. Scribal schools continued producing texts in traditional formats, even as content evolved to include more Akkadian compositions. Administrative and legal documents show adaptation of Sumerian institutional practices to new political realities. The integration of Amorite elements into this established cultural framework produced a synthesis that preserved Sumerian innovations while creating space for new contributions, ensuring the survival of humanity's first urban civilization, not as fossilized remnant, but as living tradition, continuously adapting to changing circumstances. The technological inventions of ancient Sumer transformed human capability in ways that continue to shape our world. Their writing system, though originally developed for accounting purposes, evolved into a flexible tool for recording everything from astronomical observations to poetry. This breakthrough in information technology spread throughout the Near East, inspiring derivative scripts, including alphabetic systems that eventually gave rise to most modern writing systems. Cuneiform writing influenced numerous subsequent scripts. Akkadian and Hittite adapted the system for their Semitic and Indo-European languages respectively. Elamite, Hurrian, and Urartian cultures modified cuneiform for their linguistic needs. The Proto-Sinaitic script, developed in turquoise mines of the Sinai Peninsula around 1800 BC, likely drew inspiration from Egyptian hieroglyphics, but shows conceptual influence from Mesopotamian writing, representing a crucial evolutionary step toward alphabetic systems. This script evolved into Phoenician, which gave rise to Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, and virtually all modern Western and Middle Eastern writing systems. This evolutionary chain demonstrates how Sumerian innovation established the foundation for subsequent information technologies that would transform human communication capacity. Urban civilization, pioneered in southern Mesopotamia, established patterns of human organization that spread globally. The concentration of population in planned settlements with specialized economic functions became the predominant form of human habitation worldwide. The division of labor, professionalization of crafts, and administrative hierarchies first developed in Sumerian cities, provided organizational templates adopted and adapted by subsequent societies across multiple continents. The urban model developed in cities like Uruk established fundamental patterns that persist in modern urbanism. Monumental civic centers surrounded by residential neighborhoods created spatial distinction between public and private domains. Street networks with primary arteries connecting central districts to peripheral zones established circulation patterns still visible in modern cities. Administrative buildings housing record-keeping functions. Centralized storage facilities managing resource distribution. Specialized craft quarters producing goods for broader markets. All these essential urban elements originated in Sumerian settlements. The very concept of civic identity, belonging to an urban community transcending kinship ties, represents a Sumerian innovation that transformed human social organization globally. Their practical innovations fundamentally enhanced human capability. The wheel, potentially Sumer's most transformative invention, revolutionized transportation and manufacturing. Irrigation technologies developed in the challenging Mesopotamian environment allowed agricultural intensification in diverse regions globally. Metallurgical techniques pioneered by Sumerian craftspeople laid foundations for technological developments that would culminate in the modern industrial age. The plough represents one of Sumer's most consequential technological contributions. Early versions pulled by domesticated oxen dramatically increased agricultural productivity by breaking soil more efficiently than hand tools. This innovation supported population growth while reducing labor requirements, enabling the social specialization necessary for complex civilization. Sumerian cedar ploughs, which deposited grain automatically while opening furrows, further increased efficiency. By transforming agricultural production capacity, these technologies created the material foundation for all subsequent cultural achievements. Mathematical concepts developed for practical administration evolved into abstract systems with widespread application. The sexagesimal system, based on units of 60, survives in our measurement of time and angular geometry. Place value notation, essential for advanced calculation, appears fully developed in Sumerian mathematical texts. These numerical innovations enabled increasingly sophisticated understanding of quantitative relationships across multiple disciplines. Mathematical tablets from the Neo-Sumerian period demonstrate remarkable computational capability. Problems involving calculation of field areas show understanding of geometric principles. Scribes calculated volumes of canals and excavations with sophisticated three-dimensional reasoning. The concept of mathematical reciprocals, numbers that multiply to produce one, facilitated complex division operations. Perhaps most significantly, the place value system allowed representation of arbitrarily large or small quantities using limited symbols, a conceptual breakthrough that made advanced mathematics possible. These innovations created intellectual foundations for subsequent mathematical development throughout the ancient world and beyond. Legal principles established in early Sumerian codes influenced subsequent traditions throughout the Near East and Mediterranean world. The concept of written law, publicly displayed and systematically organized, established foundations for later legal development. Distinctions between categories of offenses, graduated penalties based on circumstances, and procedural regulations for adjudication all appear in Sumerian legal sources, anticipating features of modern legal systems. The law code of Ur-Nammu established key jurisprudential principles that resonated through subsequent legal traditions. The presumption that laws should be publicly accessible rather than arbitrary or secret established essential foundation for rule of law. Distinctions between intentional and unintentional acts created basis for considering mental state when determining culpability. The preference for monetary compensation over physical retaliation introduced proportionality principles that would influence later legal thinking. These concepts further developed in the Code of Hammurabi and transmitted to Hebrew law, Greek legal systems, and eventually Roman jurisprudence, created intellectual lineage connecting Sumerian innovation with modern legal principles. Mythological themes from Sumerian literature resonated through subsequent cultural traditions. The flood narrative from the Gilgamesh epic parallels later biblical accounts. Creation stories involving divine crafting of humans from clay influenced multiple religious traditions. Concepts of divine judgment, cosmic order, and humanity's relationship with supernatural powers established patterns of religious thought that would echo through millennia of theological reflection across multiple faith traditions. The Sumerian flood story, preserved in the Epic of Gilgamesh, shares remarkable parallels with later biblical narratives. A divinely sent deluge destroys humanity except for one righteous man instructed to build a boat. After the waters recede, the survivor offers sacrifice pleasing to the gods, who establish covenant promising no future destruction. This narrative pattern, originating in Sumerian tradition, appears in the Hebrew Bible's Noah story and in numerous other Near Eastern flood accounts. Similarly, Sumerian creation narratives depicting humans formed from clay resonate through Genesis, Greek mythology, Egyptian religion, and countless other traditions. These mythological patterns demonstrate how Sumerian religious concepts provided enduring narrative frameworks for exploring fundamental questions about human existence and divine relationship. The knowledge of this remarkable civilization faded from human memory for thousands of years. Classical Greek and Roman writers preserved fragmentary information about Babylon, but knew nothing of its Sumerian predecessors. Biblical references to Babel and Shinar gave no hint of the rich cultural achievements buried beneath Mesopotamian soil. Only in the 19th century did systematic archaeological investigation begin uncovering this lost world. Early European travelers like Claudius Rich, who visited Mesopotamian ruins in 1811, produced the first accurate maps and descriptions of ancient sites. Paul-Émile Botta and Austin Henry Layard conducted the first systematic excavations in the 1840s, uncovering spectacular Assyrian palaces, but failing to recognize the earlier Sumerian civilization beneath. French archaeologist Ernest de Sardzeck made the crucial breakthrough at Tello, ancient Girsu, in 1877, unearthing statues with inscriptions in non-Semitic language, the first recognized Sumerian artifacts. These discoveries initiated scholarly recognition that Mesopotamian civilization had deeper roots than previously understood. The discoveries of Leonard Woolley at ancient Ur between 1922 and 1934 revealed the splendor of Sumerian achievement to modern audiences. His excavation of the royal cemetery uncovered astonishing treasures: gold headdresses, musical instruments, intricate jewelry, demonstrating technological and artistic sophistication far beyond what scholars had imagined possible for the 3rd millennium BC. These findings forced fundamental reconsideration of early human technological development and artistic capability. Woolley's meticulous excavation techniques allowed unprecedented insight into Sumerian funeral practices. The royal cemetery contained 16 death pits, where kings and queens were buried with retainers who apparently accompanied their masters voluntarily into death. These graves yielded extraordinary artifacts, including the standard of Ur, the gold and lapis lazuli ram in a thicket, and the magnificent headdress of Queen Puabi. Perhaps most remarkable was the discovery of musical instruments, including a silver lyre with gold and lapis decoration, providing tangible connection to Sumerian musical traditions, previously known only through textual references. These discoveries transformed understanding of Sumerian artistic achievement while raising profound questions about social practices surrounding death and kingship. Equally significant was the decipherment of cuneiform writing, allowing Sumerians to speak again through their own texts. This process began with Georg Grotefend's initial work on Old Persian inscriptions in 1802, and culminated with Henry Rawlinson's breakthrough translations of Babylonian texts by mid-century. Subsequent generations of scholars, working with hundreds of thousands of recovered tablets, gradually reconstructed Sumerian language, literature, and history, revealing the remarkable achievements of this pioneering civilization. The decipherment of Sumerian presented unique challenges, since it represented a language isolate with no known relatives to provide comparative insights. Edward Hincks recognized the language's agglutinative structure, where grammatical elements attached to word stems. François Lenormand identified crucial phonetic values for many signs. Jules Aupert first proposed the name Sumerian in 1869, recognizing this was the language of ancient Sumer mentioned in Akkadian texts. By century's end, scholars, including Friedrich Delitzsch and François Thureau d'Angin, had established systematic understanding of Sumerian grammar, enabling translations that revealed the extraordinary literary and intellectual achievements of this ancient civilization. The modern understanding of Sumer continues evolving through ongoing archaeological research and textual analysis. Digital humanities approaches allow new insights into administrative and economic patterns. Scientific examination of artifacts reveals previously undetected details of technological processes. These investigations continue expanding our appreciation for humanity's first civilization and its enduring impact on subsequent human development. Contemporary archaeological methods have revolutionized understanding of Sumerian society. Satellite imaging reveals ancient watercourses and settlement patterns invisible from ground level. Archaeobotanical analysis identifies crop varieties and agricultural practices through microscopic examination of plant remains. DNA studies of human remains provide insights into population movements and genetic relationships. Environmental sampling techniques reconstruct ancient climate conditions that influenced Sumerian development. These scientific approaches complement traditional archaeological and textual analysis, creating increasingly nuanced understanding of how environmental factors interacted with human innovation in creating the world's first urban civilization. From humble agricultural beginnings between two rivers, through urban revolution, imperial expansion, and eventual decline, the Sumerian experiment in civilization established foundations for all subsequent human social organization. Their innovative responses to environmental and social challenges created cultural patterns that continue influencing our world today. In their achievements and limitations, the ancient Sumerians reveal both the remarkable potential and inherent challenges of complex human society, a legacy that remains relevant as humanity faces its own contemporary challenges.